ignorance. Just plain stupid ignorance.
Today, we're going to discuss erupting like a volcano. Most importantly, we did consult a reverend. The baby nest. See here? She's like, excuse me, are you really going to make me do this? No women were consulted in the writing of this part. That poor baby! Oh my gosh! Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we are diving into another historical sex ed video. This one is from the 1960s, filmed on 16mm film, and some miraculously wonderful person has managed to upload it to the internet for us to go through. If you're new here and you'd like to subscribe, we would love to have you. I talk about all things periods, pregnancy, and everything in between. Let's jump into the video. It's reminiscent of old times, doing all the credits first. Nobody wants to see that. Is that what it said? Did it say a reverend? Stop. It does say reverend. Department of Education Development, National Council of Churches of Christ, USA. Sorry? Just gonna throw it out there that I don't even think in the 1960s it was necessary to consult with a reverend for sex ed. That is new. We haven't had this one yet. At least we've got a distinguished professor of education from Wayne State University. That's good. Professor and chairman of the Department of Preventative and Social Medicine at Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Great. A medical doctor. I like how they put the reverend first, though. Like, most importantly, we did consult a reverend, but also here's some professors and doctors.
In this film, we are going to discuss quite frankly.
I'm bored. I'm bored already, all right? If I'm a kid in the 1960s, I have already 100% fully checked completely out.
The things that are normal and expected in the development of children in relation to sex. Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think
yes, you make me uncomfortable.
you will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person who has a healthy, responsible attitude toward the sexual side of his life.
Okay, I'm really gonna try hard to get to the listening to the content because this is a 30-minute video, but why is he sitting like that? I can't, what? He's so uncomfortable. Look at him. My man, why are you sitting like that? Today, we're going to discuss, and then all the kids were like, I'm done, bye.
Two basic objectives to which we would like to draw your attention. First, note the many things that you should not do because they can be damaging to a healthy attitude. Then note the positive things that can be done to put sex in a proper perspective.
At least that's a good start. We'll see what their suggestions are.
Unless you're an extremely unusual audience, you will welcome some of this help. Because most people, parents or young people who are concerned about their own attitudes, have not in their own lives had the opportunity to gain this kind of insight.
I can't. It's what? I can't be serious. It's so funny. Unless, what did he say? I love that quote. Unless you are an extremely unusual audience.
Unless you're an extremely unusual audience.
Why did he say that? That's so offensive.
Have not in their own lives had the opportunity to gain this kind of insight.
I never enough understanding myself to really explain things.
I don't know at what age to start. When should I begin?
When my kids ask me anything, I get butterflies in my stomach.
Parents don't talk freely about sexual matters with their children. They can't. They've been reared in such a way that it's a bugaboo.
This is actually absolutely so true, and something that I always talk about when we're discussing sex ed, because oftentimes what you'll see, particularly in the US, but it happens everywhere, of parents who opt their children out of sex ed or who are lobbying against being able to teach sex ed in schools, is that they'll say, oh, we should be teaching this to our kids at home. And to that, I would say, certainly I would think we are better than we were in the 60s, but a large majority of parents are both too uncomfortable and too uninformed to accurately and positively approach sex ed as the sole source of information for their children. And I don't say that as a dig to them. This is a product of sex being a taboo subject in our society, of bodies being things we don't talk about or learn about. It's not their fault, but you can't count on being the sole source of information for your child if you were never presented the information in a way that was positive and fact-based. So that's really I think, dangerous attitude to take with regards to your children's health and education.
Don't know how to begin. They keep delaying and delaying until the child senses that this subject is not acceptable and turns elsewhere for information, which proves to be misinformation. The line of communication between parent and child is then broken. Fortunately, this doesn't need to be a permanent break. Let's listen to this 4-year-old in her doctor's office.
Listen, Shell, what's going to be new at your house?
We're gonna have a new baby.
Really?
Yes.
Where is the baby?
And my mama's tummy.
Do you think that the fact you start truthfully early makes any difference in the long run?
Yes, I think that by being truthful with her now, her later questions will come just as easy as what these have been to answer.
That. 100% that. I always talk about this when we talk about sex ed, but you need to be able to answer your kids' questions so that when they have bigger questions, they will come to you and not friends or the internet. And that starts with, if they're old enough to ask questions, they are old enough to get answers, and they are curious, you have to help them. That is how they get fact-based information, but also that's how you build that connection with your kids that tells them, I'm a safe place for you to come with questions, even if it's about things that might be a little uncomfortable or that, maybe your friends say they don't talk about with their parents. So to me, that is answering questions in an age-appropriate manner when they are asked. And I think our downfall a lot of times is that we want to really overexpand on anything that we're asked. And I do this, obviously, I am an endless, word vomit stream. That's probably why I do what I do on the internet, quite honestly. But if they ask, where do babies come from? And they're 4, you can say, out of my uterus. The uterus is in my tummy and it carries babies, or someone else's, whatever the reference point is. So you don't have to read more into the questions than need be. They don't need more information than the specific question they're asking. When they're older and you want to expand on that, great. But what, age appropriate, and also don't get bogged down in the details. Sometimes they just want to know, where did it literally come from? You left the house and came back with my baby brother. And the answer that they're looking for is the hospital. Or whatever. Sometimes we get so anxious and overwhelmed with the question, we get bogged down in the details, and we don't realize they're just asking something kind of simple, actually, and we don't need to go crazy with a sperm and an egg, and, it may not be time for that.
Shelley at this age is not particularly interested in how the baby got in there, nor even how it's going to get out. But there it is, an acceptable fact, and quite exciting, too. This phase of reproduction is fairly easy for most parents to handle. The next question, however, most parents find a little more difficult to manage.
I know that the baby grows inside you. That's where Johnny was. But he seems so big. What I wonder is, how does he get out of there? Your belly button? It's too small.
That is very cute that they made her ask if it comes out the belly button. Yeah, so far this is surprisingly good. And I think this is an educational video for parents about how to talk to your kids about sex, which is great. I should make a video like that for more modern information.
It's too small.
Mary, the baby doesn't come out of your navel. Let me tell you how it is. There's a special opening just in front of the place where you have your BM. It's very, very tiny, and a little girl.
Is BM something a 6-year-old would usually know?
But as you grow, it grows too, right along with the rest of you. Until when you're grown up, it gets to be just about this size. Now, when the baby's ready to be born, it stretches up to be about this size. Just big enough for the baby to slip through, head first.
But there's something else. How did the baby get started in there?
The special opening that little girls have, the one I told you about, has a name, the vagina. Now, you know that little boys like our Johnny have a penis. You see his penis when we change his diapers.
This is great information. I love it. I love how they're modeling the discussion points with parent and kid. So far, I have very few to no critiques about the actual information, but I would like to draw attention to this poor little actress kid's face, because she just does not look very excited to be having to film this scene. She's like, excuse me, are you really going to make me do this? I really hope that is her actual sibling, because she is not impressed with them making her witness this. Look at her, she's like, oh no, thank you. And I don't blame her.
When he grows up and is ready to be a father, he is able to put his penis into the vagina, that special opening that mothers have. And when he does this, he can plant the seed that starts a baby to grow.
Mary's last question is one many parents have trouble fielding. You notice that the mother is giving clear, direct answers within this child's ability to understand. Surprising as it may seem in our sex-geared culture, Children who have had a matter-of-fact approach to this subject have no more curiosity about this than many other interesting things.
Yeah, this is great. And honestly, I would say children who have been given fact-based information in a real neutral manner tend to be less uncomfortable with having these discussions, which is the goal, right? So I think they're doing a great job by giving props for this video, and whoever was consulted on it did a great job.
And our Mary, who inquired so naturally about how the baby got out, may not have absorbed all the discussion, but she's satisfied for now and perhaps even a little bored. The important thing is that she knows she can come back for further information whenever she wishes. If a child does not raise these questions, as Mary does, by the time she's 7 or 8, she may be a bit reticent, and perhaps the parents should take the initiative. We've talked about the importance of answering the questions of the curious child. As children get a little older, there is a behavior pattern that is common to almost all boys and a large number of girls.
Okay, no notes except, sir, can you please look into the camera? See here? See how, like, I understand the difficulty, because sometimes I will read something here, but I am not looking at the camera. But if I'm like gonna make a camera video, we gotta look at the lens.
Masturbation. Let me at this point make a clear-cut scientific statement. Masturbation is not harmful. The young child often plays with his genitals, and after puberty, masturbation is a common release mechanism for the sex drive.
Good information. Again, I am, thanks for including great information. I'm very bothered by the fact he's not looking at the camera. I cannot focus on anything else.
The teenager will sometimes feel guilty or ashamed. What he needs right then is reassurance from his parents that they know these things happen and that the experience itself is not harmful. Parents are very wrong who add to guilt by terrifying the teenager with fables and myths, or by giving the impression that the genital areas are evil or taboo. These misstatements and misconceptions are the real dangers. Let us take a look at how these wrong attitudes toward the genital organs are formed early in infancy.
Tammy, don't do that.
Honey, that's nasty.
Honey, you know better than that.
Shame, that's nasty.
I did not expect them to hit that child. Like, I know that people do that, but all of these things are harmful, but also, please don't hit your children.
Oh, honey, you make me so ashamed of you.
When parents behave this way 50 or 100 times over a period of time, the child automatically expects...
That poor baby! Oh my gosh! This little poor child actor, this kid doesn't know that they're in a movie acting from the documentary, and I'm sure was specifically told to do this, and then watch its face. This is so sad.
Parents behave this way 50 or 100 times over a period of time, the child automatically expects this kind of reaction. Without even thinking, in his young mind, he comes to believe that he's done something bad, something wrong. This undeserved guilt can carry over into childhood or even adulthood. In fact, the parents of the babies we just saw probably were themselves treated this way when they were younger. This will have a profound effect on his feelings as he begins to mature, and especially when he reaches adolescence.
This is a great video. Honestly, I can think of some parents in my own life. Not my parents, obviously. They are wonderful and perfect. But people I know who are parents that this should be required watching for, quite honestly.
The adolescent boy has other problems, too.
I'm sure getting tired waiting to grow up. It's no fun being such a scrawny kid. Boy, when I change my pants, I'd like to crawl in that locker. I feel so undeveloped.
That's not so funny. I was so embarrassed about the size of my penis that we used to dread the days we had to go swimming. Even though it was my best sport, I was good at it, too, like you.
Parents should recognize that the feelings of inferiority that develop at this stage can be lasting and damaging for many years to come. What's more, every boy should realize that the size of his genital organs has nothing to do with fertility or his capacity as a male. But girls have their problems as well.
Would you believe it? Mother called this guy. She knows his mother, and arranged a date for me for the school dance. And it was just terrible. He was sort of a drip and couldn't even dance. I don't know how to talk to boys.
Did you tell your mother that?
You bet I did. We had a real scene afterwards. Oh, but she just said it was important to get started early, to get into the right social group.
Okay, I'm going to bring up a point that, I obviously think this video so far is quite good, and I'm impressed with the information. I'm a little bothered by the fact that they addressed the boys' worries, which is I'm not tall enough, I'm not developed enough, my parts down there not good enough, and then they're going, oh, but girls have issues too. And all the girls' issues are about boys? The girls might also have concerns about themselves. I'm a little bothered by this.
You've always been, sort of able to talk to boys. I've watched you. And sometimes I've wished I could be like that.
Here's a place where I want to make a brief comment about the influence of the advertising world in stimulating sexuality. Sales pitches for titillating devices such as perfumes, clothes, makeup are designed to lure the young girl or her over-anxious parent into accepting this exaggerated emphasis on sexuality or sex appeal as the standard. But let's get back to the girls.
You know that boy in my math class?
They're still, like, the girls' only problems are boys. I hate this. Yes, Angry Dorito in the chat is correct. No women were consulted in the writing of this part. Bad News Bella says, I was worried about my hair, clothes, friends, unfortunately my weight, many more things than boys. I agree. I mean, everyone who's ever been a preteen or teenage girl knows there are so many things to worry about. And it's weird to me that this is encouraging sex ed, but the problems the girls have are just about talking to boys.
Now I would like to turn to an entirely different subject, one of particular interest to the girls, menstruation. This is a topic, Dr. Evans, that I think you could give us some advice of a real expert.
There's been a real change in our approach to education about menstruation.
I like how they're like, okay, now we're going to talk about periods, and in order to do that, now we will accept the voice of someone who has them. Which is good. I mean, they could have left her out too.
I'll never forget when I was 14 years old. I went to the little outhouse on our farm. My new dress was stained and there was blood on my underclothes. I ran inside and showed my mother, and all she said was, "You're menstruating," and turned and walked away. I had to find out how to take care of myself from my cousin.
That is horrible. And I know it used to be like that, but that is horrible.
Your girlfriends are told in advance by their mothers.
No, I'm afraid not. They were just as scared as I was. Some of them had older sisters who told them. One thing I was sure of, I would never let this happen to my daughter.
Why do you suppose your mother didn't tell you in advance?
Ignorance. Just plain stupid ignorance.
She's so angry still. I don't blame her. I mean, can you imagine how terrifying that would be? You're 12 and all of a sudden you think you're dying and your mom just is like, yep, you're menstruating. Carry on.
A mother who's had this experience is not likely to repeat it with her own daughter. Hopefully, the subject will come up for discussion at home long before the film strip about menstruation is shown in a girl's health class during the 6th grade.
Hello, what you got?
Hi, hon. Personal things for myself. Whoop.
Well, I'm glad to know that that hasn't changed, because that is exactly how my children react every single time I walk into any room carrying a bag. There is something exciting in that, and it probably belongs to me by default every time without fail.
Mommy, what's this?
Well, I guess, honey, you're old enough now to understand these things. Those are sanitary pads for me, honey. You know that mothers have a special place inside them where the babies grow before they come out. Each month in a grown-up woman, a sort of soft, nesty place builds up. And some of the nest is blood. And if a woman is going to have a baby, she needs this nest for the baby to grow in. Now, let me tell you what the pads are for.
Don't think I've ever heard it called a nest. I'm gonna start calling your endometrium a nest. Why is that so funny to me? And here, you can see the baby nest.
If no baby has started there, then the blood in the nest isn't needed, and it just dribbles out of the vagina for a few days. And then a fresh new nest place starts building up. That's what the pads are for, to catch the blood.
Does it hurt?
It shouldn't. It's something that happens to every girl when she grows up.
Again, we try to explain to them in a simple way just what they really want to know. Certainly the child at this point has not been given the whole picture, but if the parent has laid the groundwork carefully, this will be merely another step toward full understanding.
I would appreciate that part of the conversation of does it hurt being presented a little differently. So when my kids have asked this, I will say something like, sometimes people have cramps when they have period and it feels a bit like a tummy ache, but it shouldn't be terrible and you should still be able to do your normal daily things. And if it's interfering with your life in any way that is really bothersome to you because you're having that much pain, then we should talk with your doctor about it.
Again. In girls between the...
This is my favorite subject. I'm so excited. I love talking about this. I can't wait to watch this.
15, hormones from the pituitary gland in the brain cause the ovaries to secrete ovarian hormones, which stimulate the development of the female traits. The hips fill out, the breasts develop, hair begins to grow, and the uterus enlarges. As puberty progresses, a cycle emerges wherein the ovary erupts an egg each month at about the time the lining of the uterus reaches its peak of development.
Can we not say erupts an egg? That sounds like the visual of that, if you're telling your children, is a bit scary, especially if you're not explaining to them that it's microscopic, because in their head, they are imagining an ovary in their body erupting like a volcano, a chicken egg. That's what they're thinking. That is what, let's phrase that different.
Development. The egg passes through the fallopian tube, the place where fertilization occurs, and the stage is then set for fertilization with the sperm. If the egg is fertilized, it settles into the lining of the uterus. If there is no fertilization,
some might call it settling into its nest.
Menstruation occurs. Since the uterine lining, or that nesty place little Mary was told about, is not needed to...
That nesty place. I can't. It's so funny. Oh, that's a great point, actually. This is showing the ovary here being connected to the fallopian tube, and it's not actually. This isn't quite accurate. I mean, there is some connection-ish, but not like that. That isn't how it works, and the fembria on the end of the tube are not connected to the ovary. Oh, I have a great, more correct image behind me, but it's not in focus. And there is a bit of connection here with just an overlying what is called the broad ligament. And it's kind of just thin tissue that has vessels and things in it, but it's not connected like that image shows. And then the ovary here on this side is connected to the uterus with the uterovarian ligament. And that's accurately shown in their depiction here. So this would be the uterovarian ligament. And then the ovary does have another connection on this side, which is not shown at all back here. So this is actually inaccurate on this side. And this connection is inaccurate on the screen. So this would be the IP ligament, or infundibulopelvic ligament, and it contains massive blood vessels that supply the ovary. I mean, not massive compared to some blood vessels, but quite big vessels. And that connects it to the pelvic sidewall. So there are two connections of the ovary, one to the uterus and one to the pelvic sidewall. And then the broad ligament kind of lays as a blanket over it, but it isn't connected like this.
Nourish the fertilized egg, it is sloughed off. This sloughing off of the broken down cells and blood from the lining of the uterus and their discharge through the vagina is what menstruation actually is. And when did you first learn about menstrual periods?
I really can't remember. I do remember, though, when I started to develop. My mother reminded me that I'd probably be starting soon. And then she did a very practical thing. She gave me a belt and a pad, and I was all set. Most of my friends' mothers didn't do it this well, though. Among my friends, it really ran the gamut about what they knew and what they didn't know.
My kids have that experience as well, because I've always talked to them, and they probably know a lot more than their friends, just partially by nature of what I do for my job. Like their puberty education, New Zealand schools, in my opinion, do a really great job with puberty education. Actually, I got permission from my daughter to take some photos of one of the things they've done recently, and she said it was fun. So they came home with a booklet that they had from school, and it contained lots of really interesting things that they had gone through, but they had labeled the correct words for the anatomy, both on the inside and on the outside. They had, I thought this was kind of interesting, that they had put in like a word search where they had to find the words and then define what the words were. So I thought that was pretty cool. It also had male anatomy as well. So labeling the internal and external female and male anatomy, and same thing with the word search, and then having to define that. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't do anything like that at school in Texas, and I'm certain it's worse now. That was just a small portion of their workbook that they had gone through, but...
Looking at the information that you received before you started, how would you evaluate it?
My mother was pretty realistic, but I think I was a little misled by some of the booklets and films that we saw. There was too much that was rather flowery. What I mean is, everything was either delightfully benign or scientifically factual, and was so detached from me. None of the nuisance elements were brought out, and really, that's what's the biggest headache to most girls. No one ever mentions that you can wear 2 pads on a heavy day, or that tampons are all right even if you aren't married.
You mean that what you really needed to know is that menstruation is a nuisance, but not something terribly unpleasant.
Oh, I don't know. After a few periods, a girl becomes very aware of some of these nuisance factors. Really, they're just inconveniences for the most part. Of course, it's nothing like in my mother's day. Not nearly so restricted. You should hear my mother laugh about her high school gym class. All the ladies who were having their periods had to get in their gym suits. Then they'd sit along the sidelines, radiating their attainment of womanhood and smugly enjoying their femaleness, while the rest of them whacked the volleyball.
They don't do it that way anymore. Perhaps you've heard some of the old wives' tales about the...
That's an interesting anecdote that she threw in there. And I do like how she described it. And I have put together like a menstrual kit that I think everybody should do for their kids when they are getting around the age. You know, just throw in a pair of period underwear, some pads into a little like waterproof pouch. And that way they're not ever caught without something if they start when they're at school or whatever. And, you know, just let them be prepared and talk to them on their level and answer their questions. And I think we think too in-depth about it and we make it so much bigger than it has to be.
Don't take a bath, don't wash your hair, don't eat pickles while you're menstruating. But one thing I do want to point out, and that is that some girls who do have severe cramps and are confined to bed during their periods make the mistake of accepting this as par for the course. These girls can be helped and they should see their doctors.
This is such a good video. I think this is just, you know, there's a few little points here and there where I'm like, but by and large, this is exceptional. This should still be required, but actually, we should remake it where it's not so freaking boring. But aside from that, it's great. I like this. Good job.
It should be evident the advantages of starting early with explanations to children.
If you ask most parents what they really want for their children, the answer fundamentally is a good, satisfying, happy life. If we begin early to create an atmosphere of understanding in which the child is allowed to express his real feelings, He
still has to stop sitting like that. It is so uncomfortable. I can't hardly even watch him. And then if you imagine playing this in 1x speed instead of 1.25, it's just like...
give honest answers to his questions, we're well on the road to the kind of parent-child relationship that fosters the development of true maturity. Good communication between parent and child is one of the best ways of preventing problems.
You know what? I'm impressed. That was great information. The Sex Information and Education Council of the United States. Does that still exist? Do you think this has been disbanded? We're gonna watch the rest of these credits and then I'm gonna go look that up.
What is this film really saying? First of all, that sex is normally and properly a part of each one of us from babyhood on. Secondly, that understanding and acceptance of the normal sexuality of children of all ages is a must for every adult.
I guess that this is that person who they were referencing in the previous slide. So Mary, the doctor, who is the head of that Education Sex Council, which honestly, so cool in the 60s to have a female doctor who was the head of a sex education council for the US. That is this video and the fact that she was head of the sex education council in the US in the 60s is really progressive. Like, I feel like we should do a deep dive into her and who she is and what kind of work she did.
What children need from us is information to answer all of their questions. This is a must, just to protect them against the misinformation and wrong attitudes that are all around us. Most of all, children need parents who can show love for each other and for their children.
She's great. Honestly, she should have been the one giving the information because she seems so much less like, you know...
And of course, all of us carry the same goals in our hearts for our children. Happiness in their own marriages and in their own family lives later on.
That was so good. I'm so proud. I'm so happy we watched this, honestly. That was so good. Let's read more about her. I want to know more about her. Let's read about the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. So this is a nonprofit organization that is based in DC and dedicated to advancing sex education through advocacy, policy, and coalition building. And they say that it was originally founded in 1964 by Mary Calderone, who is the person that we just saw in that video. So at the time of that video was probably a quite new organization. She was the director of Planned Parenthood at the time. With the conviction that sex education was sorely lacking in American society and simply handing out contraception was not enough, Dr. Calderone quit her position at Planned Parenthood and established the Sex Information and Education Council of the United States, later renamed as Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, the first and only single-issue national advocacy group dedicated to promoting sex education. Driven by Dr. Calderone's dynamic docs across the nation and its mission statement to establish man's sexuality as a health entity, the organization became an essential umbrella group for school administrators, sex educators, physicians, social activists, and parents seeking to access information about teaching sexuality education. And you know what? If that video was, the music's on. If that video was any indication of what they were doing, and that was kind of like what she set that up for, they did a wonderful job. She's known as the mother of sex education, as well as the grand dame of sex education. Dr. Calderone was an instrumental figure in the advancement of sex ed in the United States and is credited with transforming sex education from a series of vague moral lessons focused on disease and reproduction to a scientifically informed, comprehensive framework. That is absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that we decided to look her up. She eventually became a target for right-wing politicians, absolutely not surprising, and conservative religious groups like the Christian Crusade, the John Birch Society, and the Moral Majority, who spent an estimated $40 million on a vicious smear campaign to discredit her. Okay, this is our next deep dive. What? That's wild. This woman is like making excellent sex education in the 60s. She's a doctor, and these right-wing politicians spent $40 million on a smear campaign. How much would that be in current times? How much was 40 million? Why were they so threatened by her? This is wild. Y'all, this is crazy. 40 million in 1968 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $362.8 million on a political smear campaign because this woman was promoting sex education. I have no words. This is wild. We have to do a video about this. In 1968, Billy James Hargis and Gordon V. Drake targeted SIECUS, and in particular, Dr. Calderone, in the famous "Is the Schoolhouse the Proper Place to Teach Raw Sex" pamphlet. Oh my God. We haven't progressed at all, guys. Read the name of this. This is how do I not know about this? This is something that would happen now. Claiming that the organization sought to undermine the Christian morality, promote promiscuity, and corrupt children. They haven't changed their tactics at all. This is crazy. The pamphlet also argued that sex education is part of a giant communist conspiracy. Are we just living in a loop? After years of vitriolic attacks and death threats from extremist groups, Dr. Calderone retired in 1982 at the age of 78. She's like, I do not give a flying fuck what you guys are doing. I am going to keep working on this passion project that improves the well-being of our U.S. kids until I retire at 78. After years of the equivalent of $360 million in smear campaigns, death threats. This is crazy. And she died in 1998 at the age of 94. Described by Time magazine as angry little pamphlet. Is that what it said? I missed that. That's so funny. So she was the first female director of Planned Parenthood and advocated for reform to abortion laws. Oh my gosh, can you imagine her just, wherever she is in this universe at this point, being like, what the are you guys doing? We worked so hard for those rights that you are getting rid of, and now people are going to die. Under her leadership, Planned Parenthood organized a national conference of medical professionals on the subject in 1955, known as Abortion in the United States. The conference marked the first instance of physicians and professionals advocating for the reform of abortion laws, contributing significantly to the creation of a movement for the reform of abortion laws in the U.S. In 1960, the FDA approved the first oral contraceptive. Calderone lobbied the AMA to endorse contraception as standard medical practice. After a 4-year effort, she successfully reversed the AMA's policy against providing birth control information to patients, helping to integrate birth control into mainstream American medicine. Holy shit! I didn't even know that that was a thing, that the American Medical Association used to have a policy against providing birth control information to people. This is just absolutely so fascinating to me. I love her. I want to make a shirt with her face on it or something.